Good morning, everyone. I'm sure we're not going to outperform your singing, but let's try to make it interactive. I'll start with a question. Who in the audience is coming from the corporate world? Raise hands. 1, 2, working for a corporation, about 5, 6, 7 people. Okay, more than I anticipated, good. Who's coming from corporate foundations? 2, 3, 4, 5 people, okay, very good. And who has been working intimately, very closely with corporations? Very good. So we're going to have a lot of interaction. That's good. We were a bit afraid that we would be alien to you, talking about corporations in the VPO space. When I maybe first quickly introduce myself, I'm Steven. I'm here in the capacity of co-researcher of the EVPA. We did a research on the role of corporates and corporate foundations in the VPSI space. But before that, I was for a long time working in the corporate world. And I still remember when I went to my first conference of the EVPA in Luxembourg, where I met Doug and many others. I was about the only corporate guy. And I couldn't understand, because I could see quite a lot of synergies and win-wins when corporates would team up with venture philanthropy organizations and even social purpose organizations. But I couldn't find them. So I started knocking on the door of EVPA, and I was questioning every year over and again, where are the corporates? And maybe they got tired of me, maybe they thought, a smart question. So we decided last year to launch a research. And for the research, we interviewed about 15 corporates, a couple of corporate foundations, and a lot of venture philanthropy organizations, as well as investees. We're going to launch the report. The report is not yet out there. We're going to launch the report in London and Paris in the next weeks to come, but then you can find it online. Now, rather than going through all the findings of the report, we'd preferred with AVPN to make it much more interactive and let the people talk. People from different angles, and I'm going to introduce them in a minute. The session is going to build as follows. I'm going to give a quick introduction to kind of set a scene, and then each of them going to have their story, and then we'll quickly move to the audience for a lot of questions. That's about the setting. So engaging corporations in social causes. And I can see a lot of people thinking, is this social washing? Is this greenwashing? But what we see happening in an accelerated space over the last 5, 7 years is that many companies, and whether you call it inclusive business or shared value or hybrid value chains, many of the big corporations, you can see them over there, they're serious about building a sustainable environment. Whether it's environmental, whether it's social, or whether it's ethical. Many of them still are not yet there, so we are kind of front runners, and those companies kind of set the pace. But it's happening. But more than that, which is important, is that they start to realize that they cannot do it on themselves. They need the other players to come in as well, to make truly a sustainable environment, whether it's government or whether it's civil society. And I share with you some examples. If you see that the top 100 executives of Boehringer Ingelheim set out a major program to match those top executives with top social entrepreneurs of Ashoka in healthcare, that's what's happening. To source social innovations in healthcare that those executives can bring back to their companies. Another example is where Rockefeller and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are working big time with large corporations on many different programs. Impact investors. Leapfrog is a famous impact investor in the space of microinsurance. They're working together with Swiss Re. Lafarge, Danone, many other companies, they team up with microfinance institutes. Drishte and Nestle, a very well-known example of India, they're teaming up to get to the last mile distribution of their products. And PepsiCo is working together on chickpeas with the Ethiopian government to kind of cultivate and kind of provide the supply of those chickpeas. So many examples we see where in different capacities corporates come together with governments and with civil sector organizations to kind of build those sustainable settings. Now, what is happening? And I think you all know, your space is evolving very rapidly. You're coming from the left from 10 years ago where philanthropy was kind of name of the game. But nowadays, and that's the reason why you're so present over here today, is that you're moving from, let's say, impact only to impact first. I assume this kind of graph is familiar to all of you. It's kind of standard graph of EVPA and probably of AVPN as well. So they're moving from left to middle. And the same is happening, in fact, with corporates. Corporates are moving from finance only to finance first. So something must happen, or must happen in the course of, let's say, the last couple of years, and is happening. The big question is, where do they meet in the middle? What's the role of corporates coming from right finance only to finance first? And what's the role of the VPO sector coming from impact only to impact first? What's their, let's say, respective roles in this co-creation? That's what this session is all about. Let me share two last graphs that come out of the report. And this is a sneak preview. I see a lot of people taking pictures. Keep them for another couple of weeks because the report is not yet released. But this picture, what we kind of figured out is you could imagine that if you're going to reach out to corporates, it's not any corporate that will be, let's say, very hospitable to receive you. We first kind of were drawing a graph where we said, what is the motivation of the company? That's very important to figure out. If the company is still in the old kind of, and I know it's a bit touchy, but I still use the word, in the old CSR kind of setting, if that's still the case, probably they'll have a hard time to understand what you're after. But if truly after what we call value creation, then probably they'll start to understand how they can team up. Now, what is value creation? Now, if you see that SAP Miller is kind of sponsoring big programs on malaria, this for sure has a major impact on society, but at the same time, it has a major impact on the productivity of their employees in the factories. They measure that. They make sure that the donations into malaria kick into the bottom line of the productivity of the factories. That's where we call it shared value. Win for society and a win for the corporation as well. So it's important that, first of all, we talk to corporations that are, let's say, clearly aware of this value creation kind of notion. And the way they engage is threefold. Some corporations, as we'll see with Uniqlo, they very much do it from the inside out. They kind of integrate everything they do with a social purpose in their traditional business, whether it's their R&D department, their sales department, or their operations department. They kind of integrate it in the mainstream operation of the company. That's what we call an integrated value-creating kind of proposition. If we move up, the next one are corporates that kind of think, well, let's put together a fund. I'm sure some of you have been hearing about corporate venturing. Something like corporate impact venturing starts to emerge. I think I can say that on behalf, maybe not on behalf of Mars, but about Mars. I don't know whether you noticed that over the last couple of weeks there was an announcement where Danone and Mars, they are launching a fund of 120 million euros, dollars? Euros, 120, well, it's about the same today, 120 million euros, with the sole purpose to make small-scale farming, household farming, sustainable. So those people kind of not outsource, but they are searching for social business innovations through venture, corporate venturing. The last one, what we noticed is that some corporations put this kind of, I would say, goal onto their corporate foundation. And in this example, there is CNA that Leslie Johnston, we were talking to her 4 or 5 years ago. CNA had a lot of foundations scattered all around the world. She kind of regrouped it, but she did much more than that. She kind of aligned the strategy of the corporate foundation with the corporation around 3 themes: sustainable products, looking for organic cotton, and once they invest into that as a kind of seed money, as a kind of foundation, and it becomes mature, probably, maybe it's going to be insourced into the R&D department of CNA, a big fashion retailer. The second level is that they work around sustainable supply. They sponsor to boost the productivity of some of their suppliers as a showcase. Once they show that they can boost productivity by working with the workers, enhancing productivity, they leave it over to the corporate to do it with all their suppliers, because corporates are very good in scaling. And the last pillar is that they would like to build a sustainable supply chain, women's rights, children's rights, and so on. So she completely realigned the objectives of her foundation with that of the corporation. So that's a third kind of model we see happening. Now, you're going to ask me, and that's my last slide before I introduce the different speakers. Yeah, that's the definition, but I'm going to go over that one. You're going to ask, what could be then the role of the venture philanthropy organization in all of that? I think you appreciate that we first had to understand the corporate world before we entered into this question, but we distinguished 4 different potential roles that the VPO could play in teaming up with corporates. The first one is the VPO as an intermediary. I think I've seen a couple of examples already yesterday where skill-based volunteering comes in, where you use capacity from the corporate world to match it with required needs in human resources for the social purpose organization. And you try to bring in that kind of knowledge into the social purpose organization. But more than that, some VPOs are sourcing, literally sourcing as impact investors, social business innovations on behalf of corporations. LGT is doing that for, I think it's Swiss Re or one of the insurance companies. So they're literally sourcing social business innovations on behalf of a bigger corporation. So they act as an intermediary. Second, VPOs also sometimes co-invest. They co-invest. Mahindra Finance co-invested big time with Leapfrog to build microinsurance in India. For various reasons, we're not going to go into that, you can read that in the report. Or corporates also could start to act as exits. As exits because they can take it to the next scale. Of course, then the question comes, can we preserve social impact and so on? But yes, they act as kind of target to exit. And in fact, the corporate foundation in and by itself is also what we call a VPO. And bridging very often between the corporate world and, let's say, the VPO space. This is the setting. I hope you're still with me. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to have cases from different angles. I'm first going to go through the 4 cases, and then I'll introduce them one by one. The first case is Jay. Jay's sitting right here, coming from Japan. And Jay will represent the corporate world. Jay is working as a global CSR manager for fast retailing, Uniqlo, and they did a major job together with Grameen on building a sustainable business in retailing. The next one is Clara, sitting next to Jay, and we also invited Clara, and we're very happy to have her because she flew right from Manila, from her project on the ground, from her social purpose organization, but representing Mars. And in this case, Mars made a choice, and it's her story, that they wouldn't take it from the inside out as Jay, but they would take it from a think tank perspective. So you could take it as a kind of additional setup, how corporates, via this additional setup, try to match their kind of goals with the goals of society. So that's the second presentation. The third presentation is from, and I know I shouldn't say from an impact an impact investor perspective, because Sandeep says, no, I'm not an impact investor, I'm a VC guy, but investing in a social cause, which, okay, it's finance first or impact first, but he goes for also a long-term social solution. That's why I think we're very happy to have Sandeep over here, but he takes this perspective of the investor. And the last one, of course, you all know is Eric, because Eric is an investee. It's Splash, and he will talk from the perspective of the receiving side, from the end where he kind of gets, hopefully, something out of collaboration with corporates. So we have the different perspectives, right? And so let's start with you, Jay. My question to you would be, apart from telling your story, is this about greenwashing, social washing? Why are corporates doing this? Is there more into that? Please.
Hopefully it's not about washing anything, but there is some maybe blurry incentives to this. Why are you going about this in the first place? As the inside-out guy, maybe I'll again give you my perspective on what fast retailing Uniqlo is doing in this space, trying to do a good thing, but make it good for business. And as I run through just a couple of slides here, even though it is inside out, it can't be done alone. If we try and go in alone, we will ultimately fail, is kind of the moral of the story here, maybe. So we just pulled up just 3 slides. This is the first slide. Doing good can be good for the business and good for the brand. My background is marketing, environmental sustainability in process and products in the consumer electronics field, and most recently with fast retailing, which is more kind of social contribution driven business, for lack of a better word. I don't know if I've used that word before, actually. A lot of this is kind of in the social realm. 2 examples. One is Grameen Uniqlo in Bangladesh. We have 9 Grameen Uniqlo stores. We call this our social business. I'll explain that very briefly in the next slide. And then the other is the employment of people with intellectual disabilities, along with some with physical disability, but most of the employees have intellectual disabilities. And we've managed to employ well over 1,200 people with intellectual disabilities in our network of 1,500 stores worldwide. Those are Uniqlo stores. So this is just the first slide to give you 2 examples of social business in an emerging market like Bangladesh, and our employment of disabilities we have 16 Uniqlo markets, which are not in emerging markets. They're actually in developed markets here. If we go to the next, I don't know if I have a, Steven, there we go. Thank you, Ayako.
Thank you.
Same rhythm to the first slide. What the social business is about is meeting local needs locally. So the model here, we source, produce locally our products, which are about 1/3 of the price of our Uniqlo stores. Maybe just by a show of hand, does anybody actually own any Uniqlo in the audience? Thank you for your business. That's more the percentage than the corporates in the audience, maybe. Hopefully you find good value for your money when you shop at Uniqlo. If you go to Dhaka, it will be maybe 1/3 of the price or half of the price. And this is where the social business aspect comes in. It's produced by locals, for locals, sold by locals at a price that locals can afford. The second example is actually from Singapore. Singapore actually hires a higher percentage of people with disabilities out of 16 markets that we operate in. They're kind of the world leader. So we have 32, actually 33 at last count, people with disabilities working in 22, I think my slide is maybe 23 stores. Anyway, it's about 1.5 people with disabilities working in our stores. And this is good for people with disabilities, empowerment, inclusion, confidence building. It's also good for our staff. And we've taken it a step further. Even the people that don't work in our stores, we call it assisted shopping. So we'll actually work with special schools in Singapore and bring them in before the store opens for about an hour and let them choose their own clothes. We give them a voucher, and it's kind of an empowerment exercise. A lot of these kids in special schools don't get to shop on their own, make their own decisions. Often their parents are with them. They come into Uniqlo, we assign them a buddy, and it's really nice to see them go through this experience of feeling normal. We take shopping for granted, but a lot of these kids in special schools don't. So this is another special thing we're doing, and again, it's good for staff. Final slide. The point here is maybe the opening point. Even though it's inside out, we can't do this alone. Both Grameen Uniqlo in Bangladesh and our work with special schools and people with disabilities in Singapore do involve partnerships. And without these partnerships, it just wouldn't happen. So as Steven, your slide, I think we are the far right finance first, and you have the CSR department, but we have to move more to the middle where we can work with either venture philanthropy organizations or other NGOs to come more to the middle, again, to find that win-win relationship. So that's just a quick overview of Uniqlo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jay. I think it's a very inspiring example of indeed moving from the far end to the middle. Just one question before we move on. What I was wondering is, do you measure the value for the business and the financial results, or is this just kind of on the side branding kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. A lot of this is difficult to track. It is quite emotional. You can talk to, for example, staff in a Uniqlo store that work with people with disabilities. An interview will show positive feedback, but it's sometimes tough to put a number on it. We have tried to get creative with KPIs. We've started to track Uniqlo stores that work with disabilities versus stores that don't. And we've found that turnover is lower in the stores that work with disabilities. So it's it's an internal KPI. But those programs are good for staff motivation, and we can measure that. Retail is kind of infamous for high turnover rates, and one of the biggest challenges a retailer has is keeping good people. And we found that it wasn't really by design, but ultimately that's one way we can measure this kind of thing, along with other things like, from a branding point of view, media coverage. How much can you get for a certain activity? Staff participation is another KPI. But it continues to be, honestly, a struggle to show, let's say, the CFO and justify why you're spending money on a program when it doesn't have the traditional market share, profit, these other financial KPIs.
Thank you for this very honest and I think very nice and open answer, Jay. Let's move on to Clara. Sorry, Clara. Clara just flew in from Manila, as I said before. She's coming from Bloom, a social purpose organization, where she's dealing with the social purpose organization. And my question to you, Clara, is you're working somewhere in between, I would say, between the people in the business and the field out there, as a think tank connected to Mars. And my question is, after you also present your case, what is the win for the social purpose organization? What's the win for the corporation, you being there in between?
Okay, so I guess the first things first. I work for Catalyst, which is the think tank within Mars, and Mars is a privately owned company. There's only 3 shareholders, so we don't face the same pressures that many public companies do. We're very lucky. Catalyst has a role. It's been around for the last 60 years, and our remit is to really challenge the way the business is done and bring new ideas in, bring new technologies, and help the business model evolve. So I don't focus on products, which I hope you're all familiar with, like M&M's, Snickers, pet food. Wrigley gum is also part of our kind of basket. And I will, I guess, start by also saying that Mars has put its stake in the ground publicly that it wants to become the most mutual business in the world. And we're not there yet. So as for an in-between, I would say the work that I'm doing on our business models is recognized as one way for Mars to enact and become a mutual business. So rather than have a foundation where they just make money and give it away, or have a CSR program where we're very quiet usually. So if I say anything politically incorrect, it's my own opinion. I'm not a formal spokesperson for Mars, but so it's a pilot. So what I do are pilots, and what Catalyst has always done are pilots for Mars, and when they're useful, they're absorbed into the business. And what I find with these pilots that I'm sharing with you today is they are a growing part of the business now across 2 continents, hopefully 3 in the next year. So mutuality in business and economics of mutuality, just a quick minute about the journey. So initially this research work started with a question from John Mars and CFO Olivier Goudet and Paul Michaels, our then CEO, to Catalyst, what should be the right level of profit? John Mars had the intuition that if you squeeze any part of our value chain too much, that eventually the system will break. So in fact, in our company, objective of the company statement written by Forrest Mars Sr. In 1947, he states that the objective of the company is to provide a mutuality of benefits across all stakeholders. So he recognized it wasn't just more for Mars. It was everyone in the ecosystem must move up in order for us to continue to grow. So we started to look at these 2 questions. Is there a relationship between profit and growth? And is there an optimal level of kind of profit that allows for sustainable and durable growth over the next century? We're not thinking about the next year, but the next 100 years. And we found there's no correlation between profit and growth. So growth of business cycles goes up and down, but profit over the last 40 years has always gone up. And especially with the financial crisis in the 2008, there started to be thinking around like maybe more and more and more isn't better, isn't the right answer. That's not sustainable. And the reason why profit has continued to move up is because we've asked our managers to create more profit. The sole social responsibility of business is to increase shareholder value. That's kind of a line of business management thinking that came from the Chicago School of Business like 40 years ago. So our proposal to the Mars leadership team and to the family is let's start measuring value in a more holistic way. Let's start looking at the different components. So what are land, the 3 pillars of economic cycle, land, people, and then capital. What are they bringing to the table? And let's remunerate each properly. And so the Economics of Mutuality, or Principle and Action Metrics program, was launched at Mars. And there were a couple of breakthrough results. So firstly, we started working across studying how do you measure people, people-related capitals like human capital and social capital. We looked at like a return on total investment in the planet, kind of like return on total assets for natural capital, and also looked at financial capital in the perspective of shared financial capital. And found also through, so working with academic institutions across the world, from Boston to Harvard to Paris School of Economics, like slowly growing this academic body of work, because our financial metrics are very well studied and very well developed, but these other forms of capital just need a lot more research and more robust. To become more robust, we also started launching a series of business model pilots with different segments of the business in different parts of the world to test these metrics out. So I guess what I'll move to is mutuality can be delivered through an inclusive business model approach based on modified metrics and management practices. So this is the body of research we have been growing. So this is our some of the work we've been doing across the value chain, from the farmer to the consumer. And the work that I do, the pilots that I do, called MAWA in Kenya and Bloom in the Philippines, and now Mekar in Indonesia, is a pilot around financial, human, and social capital. So it's a people and performance pilot. And when so my role in Catalyst is to look over emerging markets and I guess form opinions there. So I think a big topic that we're all familiar is the base of the pyramid and the 5 billion consumers at the base of the pyramid that are the future opportunity, consumer opportunity for multinationals. So in my research, looking at what we call the middle of the diamond, because our CEO is a marketing guy and it sounds better to him, so at Mars we call it the middle of the diamond. Really financial capital doesn't really exist there, and these communities lie outside of, in informal economies, outside of the realm of GDP. So what we started doing was, our argument was you can't copy and paste the same business model there. There's only so far you can stretch down by making things smaller and going through our same way of doing things. But let's try a new business model, one that focuses on human capital and social capital, and one that really requires hybrid value chain partnerships in order to meet the needs of the individual, well-being at work, to meet the needs of the community, to increase social capital, and to start building those informal institutions that increase trust. And trust is business, basically. Like on the internet, before there was PayPal, there was no e-commerce, but with PayPal, it provided the trust. This is an example. So then economic development started to grow. And we showed this correlation between an investment in human and social capital. Increasing social capital leads to increased economic performance. And this is true for cocoa farmer productivity, as well as in the micro-distribution communities that I have helped to build. So this is just some pictures from the field, because I just came from there. I think we're pretty familiar with the context, just very remote in terms of slums or rural areas. Our sales guys and our office folks don't like to go there. It's dirty, they find it's insecure, but there is still business in the community, and by creating a basket of goods, so not just Mars products, but anything the community wants and unlocking an opportunity for people within the community to become micro-distributors. We've increased our own distribution capability, as well as have created jobs in these areas. It's a hybrid value chain partnership. So the two pillars really are hybrid value chain operations, and this is a term coined from Ashoka, and it involves Wrigley and Mars leveraging our strengths in logistics and distribution and brand, and partnering with citizen sector organizations, NGOs, MFIs, to provide those other keys that the entrepreneurs need: access to finance, social support. We collaborate and develop training together. We want a basket of goods in there. No one can survive selling aspirational goods or candies alone, so I don't care what % of their basket is Mars. As long as it's in there, we're gaining distribution. And we're really trying hard to build a strong community of Bloom and Mao entrepreneurs where they can rely on each other, learn on each other. So there's different incentives in place for them to have monthly share-outs, etc. And I think that's, for now. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Clara. No, thank you. You'll notice, and that's something that came out of our research as well, is I'm sure you can clearly follow the nice stories over here, but the language those people are using is sometimes different from the language we used to use as VPOs. And this language barrier, and Jay just before the meeting was even asking me a VPO and an SPO, what this is all about. So the language barrier is definitely something we have to overcome, but that will happen if we kind of talk much more to each other. Clara, I would like you to very briefly, if you would summarize in one sentence, what's the benefit for Mars, and in one sentence, what's the benefit for society that comes up in your mind after working with both for so long time?
For Mars, our Bloom and Mawa operates where the business is not. So it is a white space for Mars, and I asked the business, where do you not want to go? What is your last priority? And that is where I start our work. For the community, we want them to be, also they're our future consumers. For the community, it's really a recognition from our end that we need to invest in human capital and the people and in the community itself, in order to actually for the whole ecosystem to grow and for our micro-distribution to survive. And I think to the point of the hybrid value chain, one of the reasons this works is because our vision is quite aligned with that of the NGO. So I know this is more than one sentence, but for example, some microfinance organizations are totally profit focused. Those partnerships have actually failed. We need to partner with those that are focused on creating livelihoods in the communities. And thanks for the question, because it reminded me to add that, this is a real business model. My team is a separate business unit from the sales org. It's outside of the sales org because they're not measured on sales KPIs. They're measured on how they deliver, are they delivering a minimum wage? How many entrepreneurs are there? How many are sticking with it? So the KPIs.
Social KPIs for.
Yeah, my team is totally on, I guess, what you would say social KPIs and non-financial forms of capital. Now, as a business, though, it is in Kenya, I started in September 2013, it's like 20% of the in-market business. So it is the priority for Kenya market. And yesterday in the Philippines, I was there with the Asia-Pac president, and it is the priority for Philippines because our business is strong in modern trade, not strong in traditional trade.
So you're going to take over Mars?
Hopefully, and John Mars will ask, what is your 50-year plan? I mean, hopefully these things, we want to see people, we want to see them develop. So our success is when one guy who was an employee becomes an employer, then maybe in 20 years, he'll become a distributor for Mars. That would be amazing.
Exactly.
So that's what
great.
we want to see happen.
Thank you, Clara. Let's move on. Sandeep, as CEO, founder of Kaizen, a pretty famous VC in India, but investing in social causes, education and the like. And as you told me, also going for the long haul, not for the short kind of win. My question to you is, as an investor, what is your benefit of teaming up with corporations?
So, just to get started, I'll talk a bit about Kaizen, what we do very quickly, and then get into the presentation to answer your question as well. And that'll answer a few other things as we go along. We started Kaizen about 5 years ago, and the idea of looking at education as an investable opportunity happened after looking at two aspects of our research. One was related to very simply what appealed to me personally. What did I want to do with the rest of my life? Second, which sector in India at that time didn't have quality capital? So after a bit of analysis of various sectors, including food and healthcare and education and logistics, sectors that I could see having fundamental shifts in economy of the country, we narrowed down to education because it appealed the most to me personally as a parent, as somebody who had taught at my mother's school, ran adult education college, when in college, and realized that it had the potential of solving many problems related to many other sectors. But never in my mind I thought that I'd be looking at investing in education from an impact perspective. It's a great place to put your money in as a parent, as a person in society, as an investor, particularly in Asia, because there is significant private capital that goes into education. Most governments do not support education to the extent they should because of budgetary constraints. So it makes perfect commercial sense. It makes perfect emotional sense. So I'll tell you my personal impact story out of this, and then I'll get into who we are and what we do. As we see education companies, we've seen 1,200 in the last 4 years. So not too wrong to say that we see most innovations that take place in education in India and Asia, at some point they pass through our doors. I know my partner Jetu sitting here that we are better parents because of it. So that's an amazing opportunity. I couldn't have been in this situation unless we had done education. Had I done healthcare, well, my kids don't get sick that often. But they go to school every day. And when they come back, it's a much more engaging conversation. And when we've looked at investing our money, our time, and guiding other people who are part of our portfolio companies, a quick fix that parents can do as part of their daily routine, which changes the focus and the quality of education discourse, is to just ask their children 3 or 4 questions in the evening. How was your school? What did you learn? What were your challenges? Who are your friends? Go through that process. It's pretty engaging, and that changes the emphasis the child places on education. Nothing else in the world can have that quality impact. So that's impact to me. That's beautiful. But that does not have any impact on my IRR. Right? So when our investors, including corporations, some German, some from Switzerland, etc., which have built quite a bit of private foundation capital or balance sheet capital over the years, have decided to step out into a sector, they've come to us either because they want to learn more about the sector from who they believe is a sector expert, so they can mitigate their own risk, or they want to be able to go to their own clients with a package which is more appealing socially as well. And since the global economic crisis, a social packaging around a normal object looks a whole lot more appealing. And it touches a different part of the wallet, which is closer to your heart. So I think it's very clever marketing to a great extent. But a lot of the corporates that have worked with us have worked because they would like to understand the sector. Education is a very defensive sector. It is a sector where when the economic cycles change, the revenue, the spend, in fact, does not track the economic cycles as well. If you look at data from 2007, 2009, when the economies went down globally, a lot of people went back to colleges and schools and employment opportunities and spent more on education. It's provable. Therefore, this has been witnessed by a lot of corporations, particularly those in media, and they've added education as a second area of focus for them. And we fall squarely in the middle of that. And India, being a hotbed of all sorts of innovation in education, is an area for them to trial and figure out what they want to do as a deeper footprint for themselves. So there is some corporations that have come to us because they believe that they would like to create a lasting impact and lasting reputation, and lasting reputation takes time, and education is a great way of creating a reputation that they can live with. This is somewhat repetitive, Stephen, given that you went through this in pretty great detail, dimensions of a social enterprise. This is our view, but I think we can go through this really quickly. Traditional businesses maximize profit potential, traditional not-for-profits maximize social impact, and sustainable social impact, social enterprises try to maximize both. What is a typical social entrepreneur in our opinion? This is not what we do, but this is adjacent to what we do. The scale of problem is large. The target group is disadvantaged, leadership's transformational, and you've got to come from a very transformational perspective to have a greater calling for yourself. An opportunity is generally inequitable, and you can bridge thoughtfully the inequity in the system through what you are creating as an entrepreneur. Generally, when people ask us, how can you deliver good quality returns to investors and also provide something of social value, we think they go hand in hand. They are not divergent, they're very convergent. Simply, if our teachers can deliver better quality education to the children, there'll be a positive social impact, and you can charge more. Therefore, you can have more revenue per child, if that's the way to look at it, than if you were to provide poorer education, because word of mouth will ultimately determine what price you can charge in the long run. So double bottom line is the only way to be in education. You cannot have divergence. We like what we do. We invest in education for various reasons, as I described earlier. It enhances skills, delivers better knowledge and better ability to innovate, enhances employment opportunity, and hopefully higher economic growth. That's pretty wide impact. But yesterday, when we were talking over a breakout session, one of the largest companies which is creating impact was never created with the idea of impact, and that would be Uber. So an entity which has brought out people who had no calling towards getting a job and given them an opportunity to be self-employed and created mini entrepreneurs out with a very commercial thought process. So this is one of the lines of thinking that we are grappling with. Is there such a thing at all which is impact investing? So we'll get there one of these days and figure out.
Yes. And Uber is a topic to be discussed, I guess, because yes, they might be doing a lot of good things, but there is also a lot of questions about their social kind of treatment, I would say. And that leads to my question, Sandeep. If I get your story right, on the one hand, you do get capital from corporations that would like to enter your space. You provide them with new markets, new opportunities, innovations, the latest about education. But how do you make sure that them giving you capital, they're not pushing you for financial return only? Is there some kind of agreement, or is there some kind of cap on what you financially bring back, and where you make sure that your social cause remains kind of intact?
It's a really good question, because I would like to therefore very quickly, and this will be a 30-second to 1-minute answer, look at education as having 3 parts. One is the core part of education, schools and colleges. Second part's more scalable, which is around the core that the core does not deliver, from preschools to training institutes, test preparation, tuitions, etc., which is, you can build bigger companies in that space. And third, education ancillary companies leveraging technology, they can be global companies. That's a portfolio approach to looking at education. We apply the same portfolio approach to investing in education. And we expect different IRRs, or multiples, so to say, across the 3 segments of education: core, parallel, and ancillary. A core, in our opinion, is about setting up schools, colleges, and the bulk of the capital required by schools and colleges is not early days about anything but infrastructure. So the asset I'm backing is an infrastructure asset. Therefore, for me to expect, in most cases, by the way, schools make 20 to 30% profits, average in Asia. Some make 50, some make 10, average 20% is not a bad average. So based on the quality of my capital going in, the cost of my capital going in, the use of capital, expecting a 30% IRR or 3x multiple is wrong, is hard from a school or college investment. Therefore, while the corporations don't tell us what you should expect from your investments, they let us be and let us do what we want. We have an internal metric to say, if I stretch a school company to think about a 30 to 40% IRR, I'll cause them to do inordinate things which are not aligned with delivering good quality education. They'll end up compromising, probably cutting teacher quality, maybe making a short-term good quality profit, in the long run definitely going down. We cannot make them do wrong things just by expecting a higher profit than the cost of the quality of capital, the use of capital determines. Number one. That applies to all education technology companies. Great. Well, MOOCs have not proven yet, but there are other ed tech companies that we know of which have delivered very good quality returns for investors, 10x, 50x. Very happy to invest in those as well as part of a strategy. And in that, the thesis that drives our investments is massification and making education available at a relatively lower cost to what yesterday's cost was, to a wider population leveraging technology. And that is impact.
Yeah. Very nice, because I think that's what we hear again from Mars and as well from Sandeep, is that corporates, and that also came out of our research, that go for the very quick kind of gain, very often have to kind of sacrifice on the social dimension. So you truly have to take a longer term perspective. But if you're a kind of front-running visionary company, you tend to build your strategy on a longer term horizon than only quarterly results. But that's a challenge, because many companies are owned by mutual funds and so on, and they're asking quarterly results. So that's a challenge definitely between the short-term financial result and the much longer-term financial viability and sustainability and social cost over time. We see that in Mars, and we see that with you as well, Sandeep. Okay, let's go to Eric. Eric comes all the way from Seattle, but has been around here for many, many years, because he is building beautiful ventures here in Asia. And my question to you, Eric, is apart again from briefly explaining Splash, is what's in for you as an investee to team up with corporates? Is it just the nice money you get, or is there much more that you can expect corporates to bring to you?
Yeah, so I only come from an NGO background. I've never worked for a business otherwise. So I'm kind of atraditional in this scope. But let me start with one half of a bookend. I think being in the sector for the last 15 years, we've been pretty thoroughly indoctrinated that NGOs have a lock on a moral compass, and businesses somehow have a lock on strategic smarts. So let me use that first and give you some context of Splash. So Splash is a safe water organization. We work in 7 countries, and we believe a couple core things that are important for this conversation. The first is that philanthropy is mercurial. It is time-bound. It is easily exhausted. How about that? We cannot rely on philanthropy alone to stay us for a decade or longer. I mean, really, if you think of the Gates Foundation, if you think of others, especially the monoliths in the sector, it's almost whimsical how they're giving us sometimes. And so to be a safe water organization and assume that we can last for 20 years on philanthropy alone, it's a immature assumption. Secondary to that, assuming that we should be anywhere for 20 years is totally inappropriate. So Splash, because of that, thinks an exit is of paramount importance anywhere we work. And when we think of exits, we try and define who the actor is that's going to take on our work wherever that is. So in China, we have decided after several years that it's the Chinese government that's the best owner of the work that we've been building over the last 8 years. In 2 years, we're going to transfer full ownership over to them, and they will have it in perpetuity. In Bangladesh, we decided that it is BRAC. I'm not sure how many of you know them. Largest NGO in the world, 110,000 employees, 900 million annual budget. Our budget this year is 3.8. We have 65 employees. So in China, it's public, in the public sector. In Bangladesh, it's the social sector. And we never thought we'd team up and exit based on the private sector. So I'll give you a little bit of context. In 2010, we raised 300,000. Again, for us at that time, that was a quarter of our budget. 300,000 to extend our work into Thailand. And our work focuses on orphanages, on street shelters, on hospitals and schools. I'd worked in Thailand for a number of years prior. Easy to get the government accreditation, easy to start working with these institutions. And figuring out how to spend that money, we thought that we would rely on a local business that does filtration installations. So they work with every 7-Eleven in the country, every Hyatt, every Hilton, every Starbucks. It's a pretty big company. We thought we could save some costs and really kind of streamline our operations by teaming with this secondary entity. And in doing so, we found in very short order they were better at this at every single level than we were. Their predictive capabilities, the way that they distribute, the way that they install, the way they I mean, you know, when you have an algae bloom in Pattaya, they know intrinsically what's going to happen in Bangkok 5 days later in a way that this international NGO could not. So we started imagining, is there a way that we could leverage them to do this work for us? Again, it's easy to think of kind of provoking a government to take over your work. It's maybe not as easy, but not too complex to imagine a group like BRAC taking over our work. But to imagine this for-profit, purely for-profit entity taking over was a stretch for us. So we spent most of 2010 trying to convince them that they should actually take over this work, or at least partner with us, lower their costs, and maybe we could see what happens after a couple of years. So we spent most of 2011 showing them all these studies, like the Edelman for-purpose study, right? In that study, they show that, you know, when you've got this ubiquitous name like a Nike, tons of social capital, tons of recognition, and you've got Adidas that doesn't quite compare, but the Adidas has a social good platform embedded in their marketing. Most respondents would jump ship and go to the Adidas instead. So we spent an entire year trying to convince this company that in fact this was good for worker engagement, worker satisfaction, worker retention, engaging of a younger workforce, all this stuff on the internal comms. And then separately, we were building out marketing materials for them to show that when they approach a Hyatt or a Hilton, this is actually fantastic for them. You know, if you've got two equal players, two equal quality products, but one again has this social good component, invariably any multinational is going to jump ship or align with the latter. So we spent we spent our $300,000 in partnership with them in year one, saying we'll pay for everything, all your installation costs, all your service costs, all your salaries, everything. Year two, what we'd like to see you do is invest 25% in this project. Again, working with Homes for the Blind, biggest orphanage in Bangkok. So again, social or public institutions for kids. Year three, it was 50-50. Year four, 25-75. And as of January of this year, we exited Thailand, and they're taking over 100% of costs. Not only that, we were able to divest entirely. So Splash does a 10-year commitment any site we work. All right, we work with an orphanage. We make sure that we guarantee service supplies, parts, all that stuff for 10 years. They bought us out of that outright. In 2013, lastly, in 2013, they were applying to be on the Thai Stock Exchange. And to do that now, in 2015 is the first year that the government is requiring that corporations report on social activities. And so they've shared with us their first report, and it's Splash's work. So this is a case of a very small NGO provoking a pretty large corporation. I mean, their budget's 20 million. Again, compared to ours, it's much larger. They're committing up to 5% of their annual revenue to these social good practices, basically mimicking our business model. So they're outpacing us, they're leaner than us, they're far better than us, and ultimately they're Thai-born, Thai-based, which means they're far more appropriate than us. It was a hell of a story. I mean, internally, we're really, really proud that this happened. Externally, we don't really talk about it. This is the first time we've actually publicly really spoken about it. But it's an incredible result. So they're publishing materials, they're marketing materials. They actually have 2 full-time CSR staff. They've never had it before. And they're ultimately leveraging their core strengths for base of pyramid in their existing business zones. I mean, it just makes sense. And prior to Splash's interaction with them, they were doing food drives, they were doing housing drives, they were doing shoe drives. I mean, stuff so far outside of their kind of core expertise. They couldn't quite lock it in. So I think in the end, our goal was to show them that CSR can actually be meaningful if they are leveraging their core strengths.
Thank you, Eric, for sharing that with us for the first time ever, apparently. Thank you. Would I be right in summarizing that, in fact, you showed them a business, which was a social business, but also a true business, but they kind of used their expertise to make it lean and to scale it? Is that how I could see it?
They already do this stuff far better than us. We just showed them that they could align it with a different population. I mean, everything they do is what we already mimic. We just kind of reverse engineered it and said, this is better if you take it on, and it's great for your internal comms, external comms, and public accreditation.
Okay, and the second question is, apparently you also alluded to the fact that it's very contextual. In some environments like China, you wouldn't probably kind of do this with corporations for different reasons, while in Thailand you kind of, you bumped into that, but you might imagine that it's very contextual, right?
Absolutely, so we're in 7 countries now. We will be out of all 7 by 2020, 2021. And in each case, public, private, or social, it doesn't matter. There is a representative local actor that's going to be better than us as an international philanthropy. Finding them's the different story. But
Wow.
it really, really opened our eyes that it wasn't inappropriate whatsoever to say that this for-profit, publicly traded entity is actually a better representative of this cause.
Thank you. I think it's very brave to say that also your kind of commitment is ending somewhere and other people can take over and kind of scale your initiation. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to open up for questions in the audience. People having questions on corporates, can we trust them? Is it only the money we're after? Yes, they're very nice guys. I mean, they'll take it. Yeah?
Yes. Can I make the first question? I'm Doris Leung from Hong Kong. I know many people talk about diamond cap here. We sell Toyota's world cap everywhere because our cap coming from Toyota. But I found there's a big gap between the social enterprise where using the commercial brand's product to make some social mission. Whereas I found the marketing department, that's not very feeling excited about our achievement. So I think the gap is where's the marketing people in the company really excited about the social mission they achieve with their product. So how can we narrow the gap with the marketing department person? I know they got budget to promote what they want to do to help the world, but they seems not doing the budget on the social mission part. Thank you.
You're a marketeer, the two of you, so
I'll take a stab at that one. Marketing, some companies will do non-product based marketing. A lot of Japanese companies used to, Panasonic would talk about their eco ideas and the kind of the philosophy of the company and spend a lot of marketing budget behind that brand image. And then they had products to back it up. So it was a nice link for, let's say, a company like that could brand themselves as eco-friendly and then have an energy-efficient fridge or TV or what have you. You run into challenges when the product itself doesn't contribute either socially or environmentally. I think so. Even if you've got a really good program, be it Bangladesh or China, or even the production process, Uniqlo makes a lot of its clothes in China, and there are a lot of issues with the factories. When it comes to pushing out that message externally through the marketing departments, the consumer doesn't see the production process. They see the product, and I think once it gets to the boss's desk and they decide which campaign to launch, product will win 9 times out of 10. Unless you can link your kind of branding story and the bigger company story, which might have a social program somewhere, again, back to product. So that, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but if you start diverging away from your business and product to the extent that the consumer might not get it, the marketing department won't amplify that message. It will, more often than not, kind of lose out, I think.
Clara, you wanted to say something, or?
I guess it's kind of from a different perspective, though, than just the product alone, because, I mean, I've also asked for things from the marketing department, and it's a bit of a negotiation to get the right tools for entrepreneurs or branded whatever. And we first, I guess what has worked was showing that that Mao or Bloom was a viable business model. So to the point that you were saying, a lot of social entrepreneurs or social businesses, they're focused on being profitable because there's an end to charity. And the same thing with ours, like we're focused on no profit, no loss, but actually it's more profitable than the existing business. So we have this profit pool to play with now and say, hey, let's make sure we give our entrepreneurs more margin. Let's, okay, find marketing, you need some money, here's some money for you too. So it's business transaction.
But it also kind of links to what both of you are saying to the findings in our research as well, is that if you go after marketing budgets, but those marketing budgets do not kind of reflect what the true activity of the company is, the product or service they deliver, and if the product or service is not truly sustainable or supporting societal or any other kind of challenges, then marketing really goes into the direction of greenwashing and social washing. And then maybe you can get some money, but it's more a kind of, building their brand on a short term rather than a long-term engagement, I would say. Other question?
Hi, I would like to ask the representative from Mars your take on last mile distribution and marketing in that regard for your micro distributors. If you could just sort of share your experiences and your take on helping them.
Super based on trust. So there's a lot of, Mars is a premium product, and we are at a price point that's often higher than everyone else. So, I mean, the market's very price sensitive, but people in our network recognize the opinions of others. So if you're in Manila, for example, the Sari Sari store owner will actually recommend you the product to try as a consumer, and you'll trust them because they're from your neighborhood. So it's very slow, very grounds up, but we've also started actually seen in areas where we've had a major drop in market share because there was a real low-cost competitor come in. I guess first the product has to be better, so we pride ourselves on quality. And then secondly, with these micro-entrepreneurs kind of being our advocates, it's actually making a difference in the market. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and I suppose how do you build these relationships with them so that they understand the context of how to present a product that you're providing, and I take it you're also doing a bit of, you play a consultative role. So if you could sort of, maybe I'm misunderstanding the approach.
NGOs are really important. So we're very good at sales, basic call procedure. We can we can provide them with the skills to help them develop the capabilities that will make them good at being a salesperson. But the NGOs also provide a huge amount of training and social support and aspects that we cannot.
In the marketing part?
In the marketing part too, yeah. So even, tactically, we have conversations with the entrepreneurs every month, share out sessions, and they give feedback on what's happening in the market. So we'll design things that are appropriate for them. So we found that bundling a few goods are better, having some kind of a flyer. So we'll kind of co-design this. So it looks a little different in Kenya than it does in the Philippines. Very grounds up.
Would you like to go first? I can wait.
Oh, you are there. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. Samira from Charities Aid Foundation, and the discussion's been very engaging, so thank you so much. My question would be to Jay, as a global CSR manager, what challenges are you facing when, and if any, when you're looking at taking your CSR mission across different cultural contexts, different regulatory and legal environments? And I think just a general question for the panel would be, from a corporate perspective, are there any concerns around how we describe or define social as these innovative models develop? And an example could be, are we looking at social where a factory sets up, or a company sets up a factory in a poor community and it creates employment, and is that social? Or what are the key things that we're looking for? Thank you.
I'll just try and briefly tackle the first question. Yeah, global CSR manager is kind of a fancy name. Uniqlo Fast Retailing is based in Tokyo. Japan is a little bit Galapagos sometimes when it comes to international sensitivity. The one challenge is admitting that you don't know everything about the markets that you're operating in. And the one thing I try to do is anything outside Japan is use local people, work with local NGOs, work with the locals. They know the situation much better. We might think we picked a pretty good program and a pretty good NGO to implement, but unless you talk to people on the ground, chances are that it wasn't the best option. So somehow, empowering the locals at the same time in the reporting lines, everybody has the reporting line. Give some direction, let the local markets figure it out, and then when you report back to, let's say, the headquarters, this is also back to the language as well. You tell the story in a way that the headquarters CEO will understand. So there is this kind of deciphering language and purpose to a project. It's almost kind of like a translation exercise, but at the end of the day, it's more facilitation rather than the execution is actually done on the ground by the locals.
And maybe very quickly, because I see we have just a couple of minutes left, what we see is that your space, the whole space of venture philanthropy has gone through a lot of professionalization, especially on measuring impact. And that's where this space can teach a lot and can give a lot of knowledge to the corporate world. The corporate world is still lacking in truly understanding how to measure social impact. So that's something where VPOs can truly come in and help corporates also to better measure and quantify outputs, impacts, and so on. That's also clearly a value add. As I have to wrap up, because the lady, I'm very sorry you're standing there for your last question. I'm sure those people will be around later on. I'd like to finish with one more last question to all of you. It's a short question and maybe a short answer. It's requesting your visionary kind of thoughts in this region, in Asia. What you think is going to be the role of corporates in the next 3 to 5 years' time? Will it still remain a bit at arm's length? Will it get more involved and accelerated between VPOs and corporates? Or where do you think it's going to go in the next time? Jay?
I'm talking too much. Very briefly, just globalization and the internet, and you have to work with others, and you just can't roll out a one-size-fits-all model. So I do see venture philanthropy as a potential bridge that will strengthen this as more and more businesses do more international business. So yes, I would say that this will only strengthen in the next 3 to 5 years.
Clara, what's your opinion?
It's great we're all converging on the same conversations around metrics, around business models, around charity alone doesn't work. And I mean, I would say the academic component is also important here. I know you work with academics. We have a multi-year research partnership with Oxford to build a new business management theory to challenge the Chicago School of Business. So they're actually going to be starting to write cases about businesses, maybe what Mars is trying to do, what Danone is doing, and these will be teaching case studies. So convergence.
It's convergence coming together.
Yes.
Sandeep?
Great. So I think either corporates will like to take forward CSR as part of a mandate, such in your case, a family office-driven mandate saying you've got to do it, and not focus on other results so much yet, but build a case towards it as a post-fact, or start towards CSR work that might be more interesting to them, as they may have profit pressures that they would cause them to look at CSR either as a way to bolster low-cost innovation, bolster doing business in areas which are related, adjacent to the core areas of business. That'll be a driving motivation for them to do more work that is socially responsible.
Eric, what do you think? You're going to exit much more to corporates in the future, or
I think the question, at least for me, is, I mean, the answer is pretty opaque in the next 3 to 5 years, but I think if you cast the vision out 10, it's going to be a really exciting time. But as governments in both India and Thailand are starting to mandate kind of social engagement for corporations, I think it's going to be a really, really tough couple of years. I mean, I'm a true optimist, absolutely through and through. But I think it's going to be, there's 3.5 million NGOs in India. That's crazy, right? I mean, there's so much to choose from, and just by extension of being an NGO, it doesn't actually mean that you're good at what you do, right? And just by extension of being a business doesn't mean you're smart at scale. So I think there's going to be a lot of collisions here, and as you get past this 3 to 5 year zone, I think most of those collisions will start to be positive.
Thank you for this positive ending, Eric. Okay, let's join me in applauding for this great panel.